So I'm back to this book called The Coming Revolution in Church Economics: Why Tithes and Offerings Are No Longer Enough and What You Can Do About it. Now, I don't recommend the book, but it definitely is something I have found worth talking about because it does speak to a lot of what's happening today. Now, there is no such thing as a revolution in church economics. In fact, there's no such thing as church economics. Anytime there's a gift to the church, it is an offering. And it is not economics, okay? So basically, this takes a business model and sort of turns everything into business. And I've had 42 years of being in churches whereby you fluctuate between being, quote, a business and being the church. Now, ultimately, it is the church and not a business. And secular world would define it as non-profit. In other words, the church exists not to make a financial profit. In fact, if you go to the local place where the legal documents are kept, somewhere there should be a legal document that states the birth of the church and its purpose. Now, most churches would have a statement that they were founded solely for the worship of Almighty God. That has nothing to do with making a profit. Now, unfortunately, we're in a day and age now whereby making a financial profit is on the minds of many. So I'm going to go to a page that is very descriptive of a situation that I found myself in. However, I do not know the author, and the author is not writing about me, but the situation is identical to the one that I recently went through. Now, it's on page 73. And on page 73, he's going to talk about a specific church. It's hard to believe. You might be surprised to learn that there are churches today that have plenty of money beyond maintaining what they have through management and accounting. However, some of these churches don't know what else to do with it. For instance, I know of a struggling church with well over $2 million in the bank, the result of endowments. But as its new pastor recently told me, the church is in decline. Only 75 people or so attend worship on Sunday morning. Those who remain, he said, take great pride in having so much money in the bank. Yet the church is not healthy. Souls are not being saved, the community is not being engaged, and the common good is not being advanced. It's hard to imagine that God is pleased with any such church sitting on its assets while needs abound, opportunity exists, and potential is squandered. The fact is that access to resources may not be the problem for some pastors and churches. Now, the church that I was in a city, and at one time it was classified as a large church. However, the congregation shrank in size, and membership declined. Now, the facilities were large enough to maybe accommodate 400 or so on Sunday morning. But the reality was, if there were 20 present on Sunday morning, it was a decent Sunday morning. So there were huge facilities and very small attendance. And yet, the church quietly maintained about $2 million in reserves in the bank. Now, what happened was that after being there for 4 years, there was a select group of people that decided I was too expensive to be included in the budget, and that they no longer wished to provide the necessary medical insurance payments for my position as pastor. Presented a hardship case to everyone around. But the reality was, there was over $2 million in stock investments in the name of the church. So eventually, I made a decision to retire and to depart from the church. Now, the money, the resources were there, and I should use the word offerings. The offerings were there to still maintain my position as it was originally given to me. But there was a group that did not want to break open the $2 million in bank accounts, in stock funds. So what this gentleman is saying has a lot of validity, and they're not necessarily off base about things. It's just that I think the book moves people from the whole idea of a church being non-profit to saying, well, what's wrong with then eventually ending up becoming a church of profit? In other words, declaring that you can eventually move into the model they presented with the footstool, or the stool, the three-legged stool of the spiritual, which is the church, and the social, which is like a charitable organization, and then the financial, which is an actual business. So the church is not one entity, in a way it's three entities, and the business component now enters into church life. So this could be true in your area, and one way you can find out is if you go to the local courthouse. There should be a document somewhere stating that the church is either for profit or non-profit. And if it's for non-profit, then getting involved in business type activities is, I'll say, very questionable. I'd like to thank you for watching this. I'd like to conclude this video by affirming the fact that this author here is definitely onto something, and churches all around, especially the smaller churches and the much older churches, are struggling, and many are closing because they're saying that we can't make it anymore. We can't financially make it. So the topic is a relevant topic. It's just that because of my age, in my experience, I cannot and I will not move towards declaring the church as a business. It is about the worship of Almighty God, period. And the edification of the saints, period. It is not about making a financial profit. The only prophet that we should be listening to are the prophets of the Old Testament, and the one who was the greatest prophet of all, Jesus the Christ. To him be praise, honor, and glory. Thank you for listening to me. This concludes the video.